Snow covered the northern valley like a shroud of glass, reflecting the pale light of a dying moon. The wind howled between the black pines, a voice that carried both warning and mourning. Beneath that endless white, a woman lay half-buried, her hair tangled with frost, her lips blue, her breath thin as smoke. Her name was Ilara, though the world had already forgotten it. Her last memory was of torches flickering against the dark, faces of her pack, the ones she had called family, twisted in rage and fear. "Traitor!" they had shouted, as stones struck her ribs and snow swallowed her cries. They claimed she had consorted with a rival alpha, lies born of hunger and desperation. Yet here she was, cast out under the law of the moon, left for death to claim her. A sound tore through the storm, the distant growl of wolves. Not the wild kind. These were disciplined, powerful, moving with purpose. She tried to open her eyes, to lift her head, but her body obeyed no command. The air shimmered, heavy with something ancient. Then a shadow fell across her. A man dismounted from a black horse, his cloak sweeping the snow. His presence silenced the wind itself. Broad shoulders beneath dark armor, eyes like the storm before lightning. Kyle, the Alpha King of Frosthaven, his name alone made men kneel and wolves lower their gaze. "What is this?" he muttered to the captain beside him. "A woman, my lord. Human, perhaps. Left for dead." Kyle knelt, brushing the frost from her face. The faint scent of wolf blood lingered beneath the cold. Something stirred within him, recognition or perhaps warning. "She's no ordinary stray," he said quietly. He lifted her hand. It trembled like a leaf in winter. "She bears a mark." The captain hesitated. "Shall we leave her, sire? The laws forbid." "Enough," Kyle interrupted, his voice low, iron in its command. He removed his cloak and wrapped it around her fragile body. The warmth of his scent, cedar, smoke, and moonlight, seeped through the fur. "No one dies in my snow." He rose, cradling her in his arms as though she weighed nothing. The storm thickened, wind biting at his face. Behind him, the wolves followed in silent formation, their eyes glinting with gold fire. Inside the fortress walls of Frosthaven, word would soon spread that the king had broken tradition. Again, he had saved a stranger. Worse, a woman not of pure blood. But for now, Kale cared only for the faint pulse beneath his fingers, the fragile rhythm of life refusing to surrender. He mounted his horse, holding her close. "Ride ahead," he ordered. "Prepare the healer's chamber." As they rode through the blizzard, Ilara stirred faintly. Her lips parted, forming no sound. Kyle leaned closer, hearing the ghost of a whisper. "Please, don't leave me." He said nothing, only tightened his hold, shielding her from the snow. Something in her voice had cracked the armor he'd worn for years, since the night his own mate died under the same moon. Behind them, the storm closed its jaws, erasing their tracks. Before them, the torches of Frosthaven burned like stars through the veil of ice. And though Ilara's consciousness faded, a single thought echoed within her. Why would the Alpha King save one the world had already condemned? The answer would come later, buried deep within the walls of that ancient keep. But tonight, the snow had failed to claim her. So began the story, whispered through generations, of the woman left to die and the king who defied the law of wolves. Before we learn who the Alpha King truly is and why fate led him to the woman in the snow, make sure you're part of this story. Subscribe and stay close, because the storm has only just begun. The walls of Frosthaven rose like fangs from the frozen earth, carved from stone darker than the night sky. When Ilara awoke, the first thing she felt was warmth, the unfamiliar touch of fire. Her body, wrapped in fur and linen, trembled beneath the scent of pine resin and wolf musk. For a moment she thought she was dead. Then came the sound of iron doors and heavy boots. Her eyes fluttered open. The chamber around her was dimly lit, firelight licking at banners that bore the sigil of a silver wolf. Shadows danced across the vaulted ceiling. She tried to move, but pain lanced through her ribs. A voice, calm yet commanding, broke the silence. "You should not be alive." Kyle stood near the hearth, his armor stripped away, his black tunic marked by the weight of rule. His eyes, grey as winter steel, fixed on her with unsettling focus. Ilara swallowed, her voice rough. "Then why am I?" Kyle said nothing for a long moment. He crossed the room, the sound of his boots echoing softly. "Because I chose not to let the snow take you." "The snow was merciful," she whispered. "Men are not." A flicker passed through his gaze, something between anger and pity. "You speak as if you know both too well." She turned her face away. "I was cast out by my pack." The door opened, and a woman entered carrying a bowl of steaming herbs. Her grey hair was braided tight, her hands stained with tinctures. "Drink this," the healer said. "It will ease the pain." Ilara hesitated. "Who are you?" "Someone who serves those the king spares," the healer replied. "And you should thank the moon for that mercy. Few defy Frosthaven's laws." Kyle's expression hardened. "Enough, Mira." The healer bowed her head but murmured under her breath, "She carries the scent of both bloods, my lord, human and wolf." Kyle's eyes shifted to Ilara again, the faintest crease between his brows. "Is that true?" Ilara met his gaze, defiant despite her weakness. "Does it matter?" "It matters," he said, voice low, "because such a mix brings danger to you and to every wolf who shelters you." She forced herself to sit up, pain cutting through her chest. "Then why bring me here at all? To question what you already fear?" Kyle stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Because I saw something in you that the snow could not claim." He turned toward the fire, his tone softening almost to himself. "And because once I left someone to die in the cold." Ilara watched him, uncertain whether to thank him or curse him. She looked down at the heavy cloak draped across her lap, the same one he had wrapped around her in the snow. Its fabric still carried his warmth. "Your people won't accept me," she said quietly. "They will obey," Kyle replied. "That will be enough." The door closed behind him, leaving only the whisper of the fire and the storm outside. Mira sighed, stirring the herbs. "You don't understand what he's risked. The council won't forgive this. No king should bring a half-blood into the keep." Ilara's eyes fixed on the flames. "Then perhaps I should die after all." Mira paused, her tone softening. "If he wished you dead, you'd still be in the snow." When the healer left, Ilara lay awake, the crackle of the fire her only companion. The fortress groaned around her like an ancient beast sleeping under stone. She could feel the power in its walls, the pulse of wolf blood older than any human kingdom. Outside, a single howl broke through the night. It was long and mournful, echoing across the valley. She didn't know if it mourned her or warned her. And in the dark of Frosthaven, where secrets slept beneath every shadow, Ilara began to realize that mercy from the Alpha King was never given without reason. Dawn came to Frosthaven like a blade of light cutting through ice. The fortress stirred awake beneath the grey sky, wolves shifting in the courtyards, guards changing posts, the breath of morning rising from every chimney. From the high tower, the Alpha King watched it all in silence. Kyle's hands rested on the stone ledge, his eyes tracing the horizon where snow met forest. The night's memory still haunted him. The woman with frost on her lashes, the pulse faint but steady beneath his touch. Below, the council gathered in the great hall. 12 men and women of pure wolf blood, bound by oath and tradition. Their whispers carried sharp edges. "She must be sent away," said Lord Darien, his tone clipped. "The law forbids mixed blood within Frosthaven." The moon decreed it. Kyle entered without ceremony, his presence enough to silence the room. "The moon also forbids cowardice," he said, his voice echoing against stone. "Yet I see it here." Darien straightened. "My king, you defy the very order that holds this kingdom together. If word spreads that Frosthaven shelters a half-blood, the southern clans will see weakness." "Let them see what they wish," Kale replied coldly. "I will not let an innocent die for their comfort." "She is not innocent," another councillor hissed. "Her scent speaks of betrayal. Perhaps she carries disease or worse." Kyle's gaze hardened. "You speak of things you do not understand." Silence followed. Even the fire in the hall seemed to quiet. Finally, Kyle turned to his captain, Arlen. "Double the watch. No one enters her chamber without my command." When the meeting ended, whispers trailed him like shadows. Some called him merciful, others cursed him, as a fool led by guilt. But Kyle knew what he had seen in the snow, the same look that once belonged to his mate before she died under a blood-red moon, the look of someone unjustly condemned. That memory burned behind his eyes as he climbed the stairway toward the healer's quarters. The scent of herbs and iron filled the air. Ilara sat by the fire, pale but upright, her hands clasped in her lap. She turned as he entered, startled but calm. "You should rest," he said. "I've rested enough to know I'm a prisoner," she answered. Kyle's brow lifted slightly. "You're under protection, not imprisonment." "Protection from what?" she asked softly. "From your own people?" He didn't answer immediately. The honesty in her tone disarmed him. "The council fears what they don't understand. Fear breeds foolishness." "And you?" she asked. "Do you fear me too?" Kyle stepped closer, his shadow falling across her face. "No," he said. "But I fear what you might awaken." Their eyes met, hers, a storm of doubt and exhaustion, his, the steady calm of a man who had seen too much. For a heartbeat, the space between them felt alive with something unnamed. She broke it first. "Why save me if your world despises what I am?" Kyle looked into the fire. "Because I once needed saving, and no one came." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the crackle of burning logs filled the silence. Then Kyle turned toward the door. "You will remain here until I say otherwise. Mira will tend to you. You'll find no chains in Frosthaven, only rules. Break them, and you'll wish the snow had taken you." As he left, Ilara's gaze followed him, searching for weakness in the man everyone feared. She found none, only loneliness wrapped in armor. Outside, Kale paused in the corridor, the weight of his crown pressing heavier than usual. The murmurs of the council echoed faintly below. Mercy, he knew, always came with a price. And though he didn't yet know it, saving the woman from the snow had already begun to change the fate of the Alpha King. Days passed before Ilara was strong enough to walk beyond her chamber. The fortress, with its endless halls and echoing silence, felt more like a tomb than a home. Yet she could sense life within its cold walls, footsteps that scurried, whispers that stopped when she passed. The people of Frosthaven saw her as something to be feared or pitied. Neither mattered to her. One morning, Mira urged her to the courtyard for air. The snow had softened under the weak sun, turning the stone paths slick. Ilara breathed deeply, letting the chill sting her lungs. For the first time since her exile, she felt the world move again. Then a small voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're the one father found in the snow." Ilara turned. A boy stood before her no older than 8. His dark hair fell over sharp eyes that mirrored Kyle's. Grey, steady, too old for his years. Beside him, a little girl clung to his arm, her curls pale as moonlight. The boy watched Ilara with the caution of a wolf pup who already knew the scent of danger. "I am," Ilara said softly. "And you must be the Alpha's children." The boy nodded once. "I'm Arik. This is my sister, Lyra." Lyra peeked from behind him. "Are you hurt?" "Not anymore," Ilara replied. "Your father made sure of that." Lyra tilted her head. "Father doesn't usually help strangers." "Then maybe I'm not one," Ilara said, smiling faintly. The boy studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for truth in her expression. "They say you have strange blood," he said finally. "Half wolf, half human. Is it true?" Ilara hesitated. "That's what they believe." "But blood doesn't always decide who we are." Arik frowned, clearly unconvinced. Lyra, however, reached out her tiny hand. "Can you tell stories?" she asked. "Mother used to tell us stories about the moon goddess. Father says he doesn't remember them right." Ilara's chest tightened. "I can try," she whispered. Mira called from the far end of the courtyard, warning them not to linger in the cold. But Lyra tugged at Ilara's hand, eyes wide with hope. Against her better judgment, Ilara followed the children back to the hearth hall. They gathered near the fire, the warmth glowing on their faces. Ilara began softly, her voice weaving through the crackle of flame. "Long ago, Before the wolves took human form, the moon looked down and saw them starving. She sent one of her own daughters to walk among them, to teach them loyalty and love. But when she fell in love with a mortal king, the moon cursed her, for no divine heart should belong to flesh. And yet her children, half moon, half man, became the first alphas. Lyra's eyes shone. So we're her children too. In a way, Elara said, we all are. When she finished, the hall was silent except for the whisper of fire. Lyra leaned against her side, drifting into sleep. Arik stood still, studying her with the same sharp intensity his father carried. My sister likes you, he said quietly. That's rare. She's kind, Elara replied. She reminds me of what I once was. Arik looked toward the doorway, where Kyle appeared, silent as shadow. His gaze softened when he saw Lyra sleeping against Elara's shoulder. She hasn't slept so peacefully since her mother passed, he said. Elara looked up at him. She misses her. So do I, Kyle answered, almost in a whisper. He stepped forward, lifting his daughter gently from Elara's arms. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting moment of warmth between two lives marked by loss. As he turned to leave, his voice lingered in the air. You may stay near them if you wish. The children seem to have decided your fate better than the council ever could. When the door closed, Elara sat before the fading fire, her heart caught between gratitude and something she dared not name. Snow fell again that night, silent and relentless. Elara stood near the window of her chamber, watching the flakes swirl against the darkened courtyard. Each gust carried whispers of the past, her old pack, her exile, the betrayal she still could not understand. The warmth she had begun to find among Kyle's children warred with the cold truth that she did not belong here. Not truly. A knock broke the silence. When she opened the door, Kyle stood there, cloaked in black and silver, the scent of pine and smoke clinging to him. His gaze swept the room before settling on her face. You've been awake since before dawn, he said. I can't sleep, she replied. The walls here are too alive. They listen. They remember, Kale corrected. Stone keeps secrets longer than men. He stepped inside without invitation, his presence filling the room. Elara turned away, uneasy under his scrutiny. Your children are kind, she said quietly. They don't see me as the rest of your people do. They see hearts, not blood, Kyle said. Something I've long forgotten how to do. She glanced at him, searching for a trace of the man beneath the title. Why did you save me, Kale? Was it mercy or guilt? He didn't answer at first. The firelight from the hall carved shadows across his face. Years ago, he said slowly, I watched my mate die because I trusted the wrong wolves. I swore I would never again risk the safety of Frosthaven for a stranger. But when I found you in the snow, I broke that oath without hesitation. You remind me of what I failed to protect. Elara's throat tightened. And now? Do you regret it? Kyle met her gaze, his voice steady. No. But I'll answer for it. He reached into the folds of his cloak and withdrew a silver dagger, its blade engraved with the ancient runes of the Moon Pact. Holding it before her, he spoke words that made the air tremble. I swear by the blood of the Alpha line, as King of Frosthaven, that no harm shall come to you within these walls. Until the moon herself calls judgment, your life is mine to guard. Elara stared at him, unable to speak. You would bind your honor to me? I already have, he said. The moment I carried you from the snow. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. You'll bring ruin upon yourself. They'll never forgive this. Kale's mouth curved in a grim half-smile. I was not crowned to be forgiven. The dagger's edge caught the light as he sliced his palm and let the blood fall onto the stone between them. The scent of iron filled the air. Then he handed her the blade. Your turn. Elara hesitated, trembling. I am not of your kind. Then let this be the first choice that makes you so, he said. Her heart pounded. Slowly she pressed the blade against her skin. Blood welled red and bright against her pale wrist. Kyle's eyes darkened, the wolf within him recognizing the act for what it was, a vow, Their blood mingled on the floor, 2 drops merging, dissolving the invisible line that had separated them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside screamed against the walls, as if the wind itself protested the bond that had been forged. Finally, Kyle said, "Rest now. The world beyond this fortress would devour you. But here, for as long as my oath stands, you are under the king's protection." When he left, Elara sank to her knees beside the mark of their blood, tracing it with her fingers until it dried. She did not yet understand what she had bound herself to, only that the vow had changed something, within him and within her. And far above the fortress, the moon hid behind clouds, as if unwilling to witness what had just begun. The snow had melted into a thin, glassy crust around Frosthaven, but inside the keep the cold lingered. Elara sat near the hearth, her hand pressed to her shoulder where the wound from the exile stones had long since healed. Yet beneath the skin, something burned. It started as a flicker, a pulse of warmth that grew stronger each night. She had not told Kyle, not even Mira. How could she explain a fire that moved beneath her flesh like living light? Mira noticed first. As she changed the bandages one morning, she froze. "By the moon," the healer whispered. The faint outline of a symbol shimmered under Elara's skin, an intricate crescent woven with lines like veins of silver. "This is no scar," Elara tried to pull away. "It's nothing. Nothing." Mira's voice trembled. "Child, do you know what this means? You carry the mark of Lunaris." Elara frowned. "Lunaris? The first mother," Mira said. "The moon's chosen. It's a sign not seen in centuries, believed to appear only in one who walks between bloodlines, wolf and human both." Elara's breath caught. "You mean cursed?" Mira shook her head. "No, blessed, or doomed, depending on who you ask." Before Elara could respond, the door opened. Kyle entered, his presence commanding even without words. His eyes moved from Mira's face to Elara's shoulder, where the faint glow still pulsed through her skin. His jaw tightened. "Leave us," he said. Mira hesitated, then bowed and slipped out. The door shut with a dull echo. Kyle crossed the room slowly, his expression unreadable. "How long have you known?" "Since the night I arrived," she admitted. "It didn't hurt then." "Now it does." He reached out, his hand stopping inches from her shoulder. "It's not supposed to appear this soon. The mark awakens only when the moon chooses." Elara met his gaze. "And what does it choose me for?" Kale's voice lowered. "Power and danger. There are old prophecies, ones even I'm forbidden to speak. They say when the Lunaris mark returns, the wolves will face judgment. Some will see you as salvation, others will see you as the end of our kind." Her heartbeat quickened. "Then what will you see me as?" Kale hesitated. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "I don't know," he said, "but the mark binds you to something larger than either of us. You cannot stay hidden much longer." Elara turned toward the fire, her voice shaking. "You should have left me in the snow." "I should have," Kyle said softly, "but I didn't." The silence between them thickened, heavy with everything unsaid. Outside, wind pressed against the shutters, carrying the faint sound of distant howls. Frosthaven's wolves were restless, sensing the shift in blood and fate. Kyle finally spoke. "The council will learn of this soon. They will demand answers." "Then tell them the truth," Elara said. "Tell them I'm nothing but a mistake you brought home." Kyle stepped closer, his tone hardening. "You are not a mistake. You are a mystery. And I intend to find out what you mean to this kingdom." Their eyes locked. In that instant, something primal stirred between them, an understanding beyond words, sharp as the edge of a blade. Kyle turned toward the door, his cloak brushing the stone. "Keep the mark hidden. Do not speak of it to anyone. If they see it before I'm ready, I may not be able to protect you again." When he was gone, Elara sank to her knees, her fingers tracing the burning mark. Beneath the skin it pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, ancient, and alive. She could not tell if it belonged to her, or to something that had only borrowed her flesh. And far above, the moon broke through the clouds, spilling its light upon Frosthaven as though it were watching. The air in Frosthaven grew heavier with each passing night. Wolves no longer howled from the valley. Instead, silence settled like an omen. Kyle could feel the tension in his bones, the way the snow seemed to wait, the way the wind carried the faint scent of iron. War was coming. Ilara noticed it too. The fortress felt smaller, filled with hushed voices and the echo of boots. The children stayed close to her, sensing something wrong. Lyra's small hand gripped hers whenever the horns sounded from the walls. One morning, Cale called for her. He stood in the council hall, armor gleaming beneath torchlight, his expression carved from stone. "The southern packs have crossed the border," he said. "They seek to test Frosthaven's strength. They will find more than they expect." Ilara met his gaze. "You mean to fight?" "I mean to defend what's mine," he replied. "And that includes you." She shook her head. "You can't protect me if your people already blame me. If they believe I bring misfortune—" Kyle stepped closer, cutting her words short. "Let them believe what they wish. I know what I saw when I found you. You were dying, and yet the storm bent around you. There's power in that, whether you understand it or not." Before she could answer, a horn split the air, 3 long blasts, followed by a chorus of shouts. Arlen burst into the hall. "My king, they've reached the outer gates. Fires on the east wall." Cale's hand went to his sword. "Evacuate the inner courtyards. Get the children to safety." Arlen hesitated, glancing toward Ilara. "And the woman?" Kyle's voice was sharp. "She stays where I can find her." The fortress erupted in chaos. Smoke curled into the corridors, and the sound of metal against metal filled the air. Ilara fled toward the children's quarters, her heart hammering. When she reached them, Lyra was crying, clutching her brother's arm. Arik stood firm, though his face was pale. "Come," Ilara said. "We must move quickly." They followed her through the lower halls, the walls trembling with every impact from outside. The scent of burning wood grew stronger. Flames licked at the edges of banners as they reached the old armory, abandoned, half-frozen, but safe for the moment. Arik looked up at her. "Father will come for us." "Yes," she said, though her voice trembled. "He will." Outside, shouts grew louder. Then came the crash of splintering gates. The enemy had breached the walls. Ilara turned toward the entrance, her pulse racing. She could hear them, boots striking stone, growls of wolves shifting in fury. Fear clawed at her chest, but something deeper pushed back. The mark beneath her skin began to glow faintly, silver threads weaving through her veins. "Stay here," she whispered to the children. "No matter what happens." Arik grabbed her sleeve. "You can't fight them." "I don't have to," she said. "I just have to keep you safe." She stepped into the corridor, where the heat from the fires met the chill of the mountain air. A shadow moved, a soldier from the rival pack, eyes burning gold. He raised his blade. Ilara lifted her hand without thinking. Light burst from her palm, silent but blinding, throwing the man backward into the wall. He fell, stunned, the metal of his weapon glowing red from the heat. Ilara stared at her trembling hand, horrified and awed. More footsteps echoed. Then Cale appeared through the smoke, his sword drawn, his face dark with fury. His eyes fell on the fallen soldier, then on her glowing mark. "You did this?" he demanded. Ilara's breath came in shudders. "I didn't mean to. He was going to—" Kyle sheathed his blade. "You saved them," he said. "You saved my children." For the first time, there was no command in his voice, only gratitude. Behind him, the fires began to die down, the wolves retreating into the night. Frosthaven stood, battered but unbroken. And in that silence, Cale looked at her as if truly seeing her for the first time. The fires had been extinguished, but Frosthaven still carried the scent of smoke and steel. Snow fell again, slow and soft, as if the sky sought to cleanse what blood and fear had left behind. Days passed in uneasy quiet. The wounded were tended, the walls rebuilt, and the whispers about Ilara spread faster than the healing. Some called her a savior, others whispered witch. Kyle had not spoken to her since the night of the attack. His silence weighed heavier than any accusation. Ilara stayed close to the children, helping Mira with the injured. trying to silence the memory of the light that had burst from her hands. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw that soldier fall, the mark on her skin blazing like a brand of fire. That evening, the great hall was prepared for a feast, an old tradition meant to remind the wolves that they still lived, that victory still belonged to Frosthaven. Ilara hesitated by the doorway, uncertain if she belonged among them. Mira nudged her forward. "You fought for this place," the healer murmured. "Let them see that." The hall glowed with torchlight. Wolves in human form gathered around long tables, laughter and ale covering the lingering fear. When Kyle entered, silence rippled through the crowd. His presence was enough to quiet the room. He wore no crown, only a simple cloak of black fur, his hair bound with a silver clasp. His gaze found Ilara instantly. "Come," he said, voice low but firm. "You will sit near me tonight." She wanted to refuse, but the murmurs around her left no room for defiance. She followed him to the high table, feeling eyes on her from every corner. Arik and Lyra smiled from their seats beside their father. Lyra reached for Ilara's hand, unafraid. That small touch steadied her more than any word could. When the music began, it was soft at first, a melody of strings and drums that echoed against stone. The wolves clapped to the rhythm, their joy returning little by little. Then Kyle stood and extended his hand to Ilara. She froze. "No," she whispered. "I don't dance." "You fought beside me," he said, his tone soft but commanding. "You can dance beside me, too." The hall watched as she placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, rough from sword and duty. He led her to the open space near the fire. The musicians shifted the tune, slower now, deeper. Kale's hand rested at her waist, his movements sure and graceful. Ilara followed his lead, uncertain at first, then surrendering to the rhythm. The world narrowed to the sound of their steps, the warmth of his touch, the firelight reflected in his eyes. Around them, conversation faded. For that brief moment, there were no titles, no bloodlines, no laws. Only the man who had pulled her from death, and the woman who had brought light back to his fortress. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she whispered, barely audible over the music. "Like what?" "Like I belong here." Kyle's breath brushed her ear. "Perhaps you do." The word struck something deep inside her. She wanted to believe him, to let the rhythm carry her beyond fear, but she could feel the eyes of the court, the weight of tradition pressing down like chains. When the song ended, Kyle didn't release her hand immediately. The hall erupted into applause, though some clapped with hesitation. Ilara stepped back, breaking the spell. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kyle inclined his head. "It wasn't a command this time," he murmured. "It was an invitation." As the night went on, she returned to her seat beside the children. From across the hall, Kyle's gaze found hers again and again. Neither smiled, yet something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that neither crown nor curse could silence. And outside, beneath the pale moon, the wind carried the faintest echo of music long after the fire had dimmed. The morning after the feast dawned grey and cold. The joy that had briefly touched Frosthaven was gone, replaced by unease that crept through every corridor. Ilara felt it before she even opened her eyes, the weight of silence, the tension in the air. When she stepped into the courtyard, soldiers turned their gazes away, and servants whispered as she passed. By midday, Mira came to her chamber, face drawn. "The council has summoned the king," she said quietly. "They speak of blasphemy." Ilara's stomach tightened. "Because of me?" Mira hesitated, then nodded. "They saw you dance under the moon's light. Some say the mark on your skin glowed before the crowd. They call it a sign of corruption." Before Ilara could respond, the sound of the great bell echoed across the keep, 3 deep tolls. The summons had begun. Mira clasped Ilara's hands. "Stay here. Whatever happens, do not go to him." But Ilara knew she could not obey. In the great hall, torches burned low. The council sat in a semicircle, their cloaks heavy with silver emblems. Kyle stood before them, his posture unyielding, though shadows marked his face. Lord Darien rose first. "You defy every law that binds our kind," he said. "You brought a half-blood into Frosthaven, and now you parade her before the clans as if she were your equal. You dishonor the throne and the moon herself." Kyle's tone was calm, but his eyes flashed. "She saved this fortress. She saved my children. If that dishonors the moon, then perhaps the moon's laws are blind." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Lady Ceres, her voice cold as glass, spoke next. "You speak of mercy as if it were strength, but mercy for the unclean has always led to ruin. The mark she bears is not a gift, it's a warning." Kyle took a step forward. "I have seen warnings. I've buried them. What she carries is light, not darkness." Darian slammed his fist against the table. "You protect her because you are bewitched. The mark controls you as surely as it controls her." Kyle's voice dropped, deadly quiet. "Careful, counselor." From the edge of the hall, Elara watched unseen, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. She wanted to speak, to tell them she had never asked for any of this. But Kyle stood tall, his defiance burning brighter than the torches. Finally, the eldest counselor, High Seer Aldrich, rose. His silver hair gleamed in the dim light. "Kyle, son of the North," he said, "we do not question your courage nor the loyalty you command. But the law of the moon binds even kings. This woman must be banished. Her presence draws chaos. Frosthaven will not survive her." The hall fell silent. Every breath seemed to wait for Kyle's answer. He looked toward the door, toward her. For a heartbeat their eyes met. The world narrowed to that single, fragile connection. Then Kyle spoke, his voice steady but fierce. "You may take my throne before you take her life." The words struck like thunder. Gasps filled the hall. Darian half rose from his seat. "You would risk the kingdom for a woman whose blood is tainted?" Kyle turned to face them all. "I would risk it for the truth. For once, I will not kill what I do not understand." Elara stepped into the light before she could stop herself. "Please," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Don't fight for me. I'll leave Frosthaven if it will keep your peace." Kyle's gaze hardened. "You will not run from what you are." Darian pointed at her, venom in his tone. "Then you doom us all." Kyle drew himself up, the Alpha's command radiating through his words. "No, I save what's left worth saving." And as the council erupted in fury, Elara realized there was no turning back. The king had chosen his path, and it led straight into war. The night sky over Frosthaven burned red. The moon hung heavy and swollen, its light bleeding through the clouds like a wound that refused to close. Every wolf in the kingdom felt it, the ancient pull of the blood moon, a force older than any crown or law. The air itself trembled with power, and the mark beneath Elara's skin pulsed like a second heartbeat. She stood on the fortress balcony, breath misting in the cold. Below her the courtyard swarmed with unease. Wolves shifted restlessly in their human forms, growls rumbling low in their throats. The blood moon stripped away reason. It stirred the wildness buried deep in their veins. Kyle appeared beside her, his expression grave. The red glow caught in his eyes, sharpening the silver until it gleamed like a blade. "Stay inside," he said. "Tonight even my guards may not control themselves." Elara turned toward him. "You can feel it too." He nodded once. "It calls to every Alpha, but for you, it's different. The mark answers the moon directly. You must resist it." "I don't know how," she whispered. "It feels like it's burning through me." Kyle reached for her, his hand hovering near her shoulder. "Then I'll help you hold it back." Before he could touch her, the great bell tolled again, one long hollow note that shivered through the night. A messenger stumbled into the courtyard below, shouting over the rising wind. "The southern clans march under the red light. They're at the river." Kyle's jaw clenched. "They're using the blood moon as cover. They know our ranks will be weak tonight." He turned to leave, but Elara caught his arm. "You can't fight them like this. The moon's pulling at you." His voice dropped, fierce but quiet. "I am the Alpha King. I will not hide while my people bleed." Her grip tightened. "Then let me come with you." "No." He met her gaze, eyes fierce. "If they see you among us, they'll turn their rage on you first." The prophecy has already begun to divide them. A roar echoed from beyond the walls, deep, guttural, carried by the wind. Kyle drew his sword, the metal catching the crimson light. "Lock the gates after I leave," he ordered. "Do not open them until you hear my call." She wanted to stop him, to tell him what the mark was whispering inside her mind, that something far greater than war was coming, but the words died in her throat. As Cale vanished into the storm of red snow, Ilara felt her body tremble. The mark flared again, brighter now, and pain seared through her shoulder. She fell to her knees, clutching the fabric of her dress. The moon's voice filled her head, not in words but in emotion, grief, fury, awakening. The fortress shook. Outside, the clash of steel and the cries of wolves filled the air. Through the open balcony doors, she saw fire bloom along the riverbank. Kyle's forces met the enemy head-on, their roars echoing through the night. Then came a sound that was not war, a deep, resonant howl that split the heavens. Every wolf stopped, frozen by instinct. Ilara's heart pounded as she realized the sound had come from her. The mark on her shoulder blazed with light so bright it turned night into silver. Wind burst from the fortress, sweeping outward in a circle of shimmering energy. The snow lifted, glowing with the same light that burned within her. For a heartbeat the fighting ceased. Even Cale looked up, his sword lowered, as the glow spread across the field like dawn breaking over blood and ash. Then, just as suddenly, the light vanished. Ilara collapsed, the mark fading to a faint shimmer. The world fell silent except for the echo of that impossible howl. And beneath the blood-colored moon, Cale whispered her name as if invoking a prayer or a warning. Smoke darkened the sky above Frosthaven. The fires that had begun at the river now crawled across the valley, devouring what little peace remained. The scent of ash and blood choked the wind. Wolves howled in defiance, but their cries were fading. The fortress that had once stood as the heart of the northern kingdom was breaking. Ilara awoke on the cold floor of her chamber, the taste of iron in her mouth. Her limbs ached, her skin burned where the mark had flared. Through the open doors, she heard chaos, screams, the clash of steel, the pounding of boots on stone. The blood moon's light still bled across the world, staining everything in crimson. She tried to stand. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice raw. Mira burst into the room, her robes torn, her hands smeared with soot. "The gates have fallen," she gasped. "The southern clans breached the walls. Frosthaven burns." Ilara's pulse quickened. "Where is the king?" "Still fighting. He ordered us to flee, but the tunnels collapsed. There's nowhere left to run." Ilara's heart thudded painfully. She could still feel Cale through the strange bond that tethered them, a pulse of strength, fading but alive. "I have to find him." Mira grabbed her arm. "No, if they see you, they'll kill you. They see you. The prophecy has turned them mad. They think your mark cursed us." "Maybe it did," Ilara whispered, "but I won't let him die because of it." She tore free from Mira's grip and ran into the smoke-filled corridor. The heat burned her lungs, the floor shuddering beneath her feet as another explosion of stone echoed through the halls. She passed soldiers locked in desperate combat, wolves tearing through armor, men shouting prayers to the moon before falling silent forever. When she reached the courtyard, the air was thick with flame and shadow. Kyle stood at its center, surrounded by enemies. His sword flashed silver in the red light, his movements as fluid as the storm itself. But even a king could bleed, and blood streaked his armor. "Kyle!" she called. His head snapped toward her, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "You shouldn't be here." Before he could reach her, an arrow flew. It struck his shoulder, driving him to one knee. Ilara screamed, rushing forward. She didn't think, she only moved. The mark on her skin ignited once more, blinding white against the scarlet air. The arrow dissolved before she touched him, the archer behind it thrown backward by an unseen force. Kyle looked up at her, his voice strained. "You have to go." "No," she said, tears cutting clean lines through the ash on her cheeks. "Not without you." The ground trembled beneath them. The Southern Alpha's banner rose at the gate, a black wolf on a field of red. His voice roared through the courtyard. "The false king dies tonight." Kyle forced himself to his feet, sword in hand. "Not while I still stand." Ilara felt power gather inside her chest, wild and terrible. The moon's whisper returned, soft, urgent, calling her name. She could see the light of it spreading through her veins, hear the ancient rhythm echoing in her heart. "Don't," Kyle warned, reading the fear in her eyes. "If you unleash it, there's no return." "I already crossed that line," she said. The glow erupted outward, a pulse of silver that swept through the courtyard like wind and water combined. The flames bent away, soldiers fell to their knees, and the black banner crumbled to dust. For one perfect heartbeat, Frosthaven stood silent. Then the towers gave way. The fortress groaned, its walls splitting under the weight of ruin. Kyle caught her in his arms as debris rained around them. "You've saved them," he murmured, voice weak. "You saved us all." Ilara pressed her hand against his wound, blood slick beneath her fingers. "We'll rebuild," she whispered. But above them, the blood moon began to fade, and with it the kingdom they had known. The ruins of Frosthaven steamed beneath the pale dawn. Smoke curled into the sky like the last breath of a dying beast. The fires had burned themselves out, leaving only blackened stone and the silence of what once was. Snow began to fall again, soft and indifferent, covering the scars of battle, as if the moon herself wished to hide the shame of her children. Ilara knelt beside Kyle, who leaned against the broken remnants of the courtyard wall. His armor was dented and streaked with blood, his eyes half-lidded but alert. Around them, survivors moved like ghosts, gathering the wounded, carrying the fallen. The war was over, though victory tasted like ash. "You should have left when I told you to," Kale said, his voice rough. Ilara shook her head. "If I had, you'd be dead." He gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're bold for someone who defies kings. I only defy foolish ones." Despite everything, the destruction, the grief, he almost laughed. But the sound turned into a cough that painted the snow red. She reached for him, pressing her hand to his shoulder, willing her warmth into him. "You've lost too much blood." "I've lost more than that," Kale murmured. "Frosthaven stands because of you, but the council will not forgive what's happened here. They'll say the moon's curse consumed us both." "Then let them say it," she replied. "They already made me their monster. I don't need their forgiveness." He studied her, the weight of his gaze like something sacred. "You think I care about their forgiveness?" "You should," she said softly. "You're still their king." Kale's eyes darkened. A king without a kingdom. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of falling snow. Finally he spoke again, his tone steady but heavy with resolve. "The clans will need leadership, someone to rebuild, someone the moon still trusts. I would name you that person." Ilara stared at him, stunned. "You can't mean that." "I can," he said. "You carry the mark. You command the moon's light. They'll follow you, even if they fear you." "It's more than I can offer them now." She shook her head fiercely. "No, they need you. You're their alpha. I'm just alive because you were strong enough to survive what they couldn't," he interrupted. "You're not just anything, Ilara. You're proof that the blood they called impure was the only thing that could save them." Her throat tightened. "If you crown me, they'll say you've lost your mind." "Then they can keep their minds," Kale said. "I'll keep my choice." The quiet between them deepened. The snowfall thickened, muting the ruin into a landscape of white and smoke. Kale reached into his cloak and pulled free a fragment of his broken crown, the silver bent and scorched. He turned it over in his hand before placing it in hers. "Take it. Whether you wear it or melt it down, make something new from what we destroyed." Her fingers closed around the cold metal. "What about you?" "I'll go north," he said. "Beyond the forest, beyond the border. Let them think the Alpha King is dead. Maybe then they can start again without the shadow of my name." Ilara's chest ached. "You're running." "I'm giving them a story they can live with." She wanted to argue to make him stay, but his decision had already settled like frost between them, inevitable, immovable. Instead, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "You once said no one dies in your snow," she whispered. "Then promise me you won't either." He smiled faintly. "I'll keep that promise." Even kings keep their oaths. When he rose, the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, breaking through the ash and mist. Kyle turned once, his cloak trailing in the snow. "Lead them well, Ilara." And before she could answer, the Alpha King walked into the cold and was gone. Winter's grip finally began to fade. For the first time in months, sunlight touched the high walls of Frosthaven. What was left of them? The snow that had once seemed endless now melted into rivers that carried away the ashes of war. New shoots of green pushed through the blackened soil, defying the memory of ruin. Ilara stood on the outer rampart watching the thaw. Her cloak rippled in the soft wind, the silver mark on her shoulder faint beneath the fabric. The people who remained had begun rebuilding, stone by stone, guided not by commands, but by quiet determination. Frosthaven was no longer a fortress of fear, it was becoming a home. Mira approached, her steps slow but steady. The healer's hands were scarred, yet her eyes were bright. "The fields are nearly ready," she said. "We'll plant before the next moon. The land still remembers how to grow." Ilara nodded. "It remembers because we stayed." Mira smiled faintly. "Because you stayed. They follow you now, not out of fear, but hope. It's been a long time since I've seen that here." Hope. The word felt fragile on Ilara's tongue. So much had been lost. Kale, the old ways, the wolves who had fallen to pride and superstition. Yet somehow the world kept breathing. Children's laughter echoed from below. Arik and Lyra ran through the courtyard, their boots splashing through puddles. They had changed too. Arik's shoulders had grown broad with responsibility, though his heart still guarded his sister with the fierceness of a wolf. Lyra, once shy, now carried the same quiet confidence Ilara had seen in her father. "Arik asked if you'll bless the fields when the seeds are sown," Mira said. "The people think your light will bring a better harvest." Ilara hesitated. "I'm not sure the moon listens to me anymore." "Maybe she listens through you," Mira replied. "That's enough." When Mira left, Ilara remained alone with the wind. Her thoughts drifted north, beyond the forests, beyond the mountains, where Kyle had vanished. No word had come of him since that day. Some believed he was dead. Others claimed he had become one with the wilderness, a spirit guarding the borders of their land. Ilara had stopped searching for truth. The bond between them had not vanished entirely. Sometimes, when the moon rose full and silver, she could still feel the faint echo of his presence, steady, distant, alive. That was enough to keep her from despair. As the sun sank, she descended into the courtyard. The people greeted her with nods and smiles, not bows. A group of young wolves carried stones to rebuild the northern wall, their laughter mixing with the rhythmic strike of hammers. Lyra ran to Ilara, her cheeks flushed. "Mother says the moon will be full tonight," Lyra said. "Will you tell us a story by the fire?" Ilara brushed a strand of hair from the girl's face. "Which one do you want?" "The story of the woman who was left in the snow," Lyra answered. Ilara's breath caught, but she smiled. "Again?" Lyra nodded eagerly. "It's my favorite." That night, when the moon climbed over the repaired towers, Ilara sat by the fire with the children gathered around her. The flames flickered against the faces of the young and the weary alike. She began softly, her voice carrying over the hush of wind and water. "There was once a woman left to die in the cold," she said, "but the Alpha King found her and gave her his cloak. They thought the snow would bury her, but instead she became the light that melted it away." The listeners leaned closer, drawn not by the tale, but by the warmth in her tone. For the first time in a long while, Ilara felt peace settle within her. When she lifted her gaze to the moon, it seemed brighter than before, as if watching, approving, remembering. And though the world around her was still mending, spring had finally come to Frosthaven. The moon rose over Frosthaven, full and white, its light spilling across the valley like a blessing. The wind that once carried the scent of war now smelled of pine and spring rain. For the first time in memory, the wolves sang not in mourning, but in unity. The kingdom had survived. And tonight, it would be reborn. Ilara stood before the gathered clans in the great hall, rebuilt from the stones that once lay shattered. The banners of every pack, north, south, and east, hung side by side, their symbols glowing faintly in the torchlight. Her gown was simple, woven from silver-threaded wool, the mark on her shoulder visible like a crown of light. Mira stood behind her, eyes proud and tearful. Arik and Lyra waited near the altar, their hands clasped, their faces solemn but bright. High Seer Aldrich stepped forward, his old voice steady as he spoke. "By the will of the moon, we bear witness. Frosthaven stands united not by blood but by choice. The Alpha King's legacy endures through her who carries both wolf and human within her heart." "Ilara of the Snow, do you accept the burden of crown and pack?" Ilara's breath trembled, but her voice did not. "I do, not to rule but to guide, not to divide, but to heal." Aldrich lifted the circlet of silver, the same one Kael had once worn. The metal had been reforged, reshaped into something new. As he placed it upon her head, the mark on her skin flared, and a hush fell over the hall. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, from somewhere deep in the mountains, a wolf howled, clear, strong, eternal. Others joined, their voices rising in harmony until the walls trembled with their song. Mira whispered behind her, "The moon accepts you." Ilara looked out over her people. "The moon may guide us," she said, "but we choose our path. No blood shall define us again. From this day, no wolf will be cast into the snow for what they are." The hall erupted in cheers, not thunderous but deep and genuine. Wolves embraced, elders bowed, and children laughed as the firelight reflected off the new crown. Frosthaven, once broken, was alive again. When the celebration ended and the torches dimmed, Ilara found herself alone on the ramparts, the crown cold against her brow. The forest stretched endlessly below, its shadows calm, its heart beating steady. She closed her eyes, listening to the wind. Somewhere within it she could almost hear his voice. "You did it," she whispered. The wind answered soft and low, a sound that might have been her imagination or perhaps something more. "We did it." Her heart tightened. "Kael," she murmured, "wherever you are, the kingdom is yours as much as mine." Behind her, footsteps echoed. Arik approached, carrying Lyra half asleep in his arms. "Mother," he said softly. "Mira says it's time to rest." She turned, smiling faintly. "You two should be asleep before the moon sets." Arik shook his head. "I wanted to tell you something first." "What is it?" He met her eyes, his father's eyes. "You said no one should be left in the snow again. I think Father would be proud." Her throat tightened. "I hope so." Lyra stirred, mumbling against her brother's shoulder. "Will you tell us a story tomorrow?" Ilara brushed a hand over her hair. "Yes, the one about the Alpha who found light in the cold." As they left, she looked once more to the horizon, where the first hint of dawn touched the sky. The crown on her head caught the light, gleaming faintly like the edge of a promise. The wolves of Frosthaven had found their queen. And in that quiet moment between night and morning, Ilara knew the story was not ending. It was only beginning again, under a gentler moon. Years passed. Frosthaven no longer smelled of smoke and steel, but of pine, bread, and earth after rain. The fortress had become a city, its walls strong again but softened by ivy and laughter. Children ran where soldiers once stood guard, and peace, fragile, precious peace, had taken root like a stubborn flower in the snow. In the great hall, a fire crackled against the stone hearth, its warmth spreading through the chamber. Lyra sat beside it, her golden curls catching the light, her fingers tracing the carved wolf emblem on her pendant. Her children, two bright-eyed twins, sat cross-legged at her feet, waiting with restless excitement. "Tell it again," one of them said, "the story of the woman in the snow." Lyra smiled, her gaze drifting to the flames. "You never tire of it, do you?" The twins shook their heads. "You tell it better than anyone." She took a breath, her voice low and steady, carrying the rhythm of a tale worn smooth by time. Long ago, before Frosthaven knew peace, a woman was cast into the snow to die. She had no pack, no name, and no reason left to fight. But the moon saw her heart and sent a wolf to find her. Not just any wolf, the Alpha King himself. The children leaned closer. Was he scary? Lyra smiled softly. At first, yes. He was proud and fierce, a king who trusted no one. But when he found her lying in the storm, something changed. He gave her his cloak and carried her home. The world said she was cursed, but he saw something else. He saw light in her. The boy whispered, "Did they fall in love?" Lyra nodded. They did. But love is never simple. The council turned against them. The clans rebelled and the moon tested them both. They faced fire, betrayal, and the end of all they knew. Yet, through it all, they chose each other, even when the world tried to tear them apart. The girl frowned thoughtfully. But if they loved each other, why didn't the king stay? Lyra looked into the flames. Because sometimes love means letting go. He left so that she could lead without his shadow, and because he knew she would never stop shining, even without him. The twins were quiet for a moment. Then the boy said, "Grandmother must have missed him." "She did," Lyra said softly. "Every day. But she never let her sorrow become her cage. She rebuilt Frosthaven. She showed us that strength isn't about claws or crowns, it's about mercy." The children's eyes widened. "So the woman in the snow was the Alpha Queen?" Lyra smiled, her eyes bright with tears. "Yes, Elara, the first queen of Frosthaven. My mother." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of wolves howling in the distance. Lyra's gaze turned toward the window, where the moon hung full and silver over the valley. "And they say that when the moon is brightest, the Alpha King still walks the northern woods, guarding the borders. Some claim they've seen him when the snow falls red." The twins leaned close to the fire, captivated. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Lyra hesitated, her heart tightening with the old ache that had never truly left her bloodline. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe he never really left." The fire popped, and for an instant, the flames shimmered silver. Lyra felt the faintest warmth brush her cheek, like a whisper from a memory. She smiled, closing her eyes. "Now," she said, rising to her feet, "bedtime." The children groaned but obeyed, hugging her before running off toward the corridor. When the hall grew quiet again, Lyra sat by the dying fire, tracing the edge of her pendant. Through the flickering light, she spoke the words her mother once had. "No one is ever truly lost in the snow, not while love remembers them." Outside, a single wolf howled from the mountains, its voice carrying across Frosthaven, deep, steady, eternal. And under the silver light of the moon, the story of the Alpha King and the woman in the snow lived on, told again and again until the end of all winters.